Hi. As you've already heard, I'm George Stavropoulos, and I'll be talking to you about diversity. Now, what is diversity? Diversity is something that makes every single one of us unique. Now, how does it make us unique? It defines our personalities, our characters, and also our physical attributes, right? So it makes me different than my friend different than my teacher different than my uncle, and so on and so forth. So what are some different types of diversity? There's gender diversity. Gender diversity is something you're born with, right? It's biological, but now you can change it. You can change it from male. You can change from male to female, and it's being more socially acceptable today, and it's more accepted on a federal level. And you can also identify yourself as either male or female, depending on which gender, even if you're the opposite gender. Next is your culture. Now, culture really defines who you are, and that's because it defines who you are based off your community. See, I'm Greek, and I have a very strong sense of community, especially with the people I've grown up with. They're all my cousins. So let me tell you a small story. When my great-great-uncle came to this country, he anglicized his two children's first names. They were born here. He wanted them to live a very American lifestyle. Now, when those two boys had children, they're children of their own, they were actually sent to Greek school and put into an immersive Greek community. Now, this really was beneficial to them because it launched them into their respected fields and made them extremely successful. How, you might ask? Well, everything, despite what their grandfather said, those communities from Greek school and from all the other things that they've done actually helped them because it formed a community which people are so close in that one person is not afraid to help the other. And the people you grow up with turns out to be your family. And family stays with each other no matter what. Next is your race, your ethnicity. It's all based on natural variation, right? Natural variation, you have no control over. Next is your religion. Now, this really goes hand in hand with your culture, depending on which country you're from or which religion you're a part of, because it tells you a code of rules to live by. And these code of rules are what people and civilization have based off of for thousands of years. Next, your background, which I'm going to tie into my next point, your economic status. Now, you see, your background depends on who you hang out with, what situations define you, where you live. I mean, it's all hand in hand. And your economic attributes really, your economic status, I should say, really do vary. Because, unfortunately, in this world, people who have a higher economic status can afford to send their children to better institutions, to better programs outside of school. Now, these children might not be willing to learn it, but it pays off in the long run, like your culture. And, it really depends what family you're part of. Because if you're part of a family who are no matter what social economic class you're in, no matter how much money you have, obviously, some families actually really want you to work. And, anyone can take a course at a community college, and it's all about if you want to go the extra mile. Because if you want to go the extra mile, you will succeed in anything. And there's another point, is your ability. Now, your ability does not just mean mental or physical. It means the combination of both. See, I have friends who are better than me at basketball, way better. I can't play. I might be better than them in soccer or in chemistry, math. They might be better than me in English or memorization. So what are some problems in our nation today? Now, unfortunately, like every great place on earth, there are some problems, like I just said. First is our history. Our history sets up barriers that we have to overcome and we have to solve. And along with that, unfortunately, there's something dark. That's slavery. Slavery has been going on for thousands of years. And it was really based off of keeping the dominant majority in power and keeping the minorities down. this is really shown when, say, Romans or Greeks take over other neighboring cities or countries, and then the armies become, obviously, subject to slavery, the soldiers. These soldiers actually built the great monuments you see today in Europe. And it's speculated upon that the Egyptians actually used slaves to build the Great Pyramids and whatnot. So this all has to do with the status quo. And the status quo keeps the higher up people in the economic class in power while keeping everyone else down. Alongside that, you can see it especially in the Middle Ages with lordships, knightships, and no matter what, and you can see it in literature. And you basically set up barriers for yourself that you have to overcome. So narrow-mindedness being narrow-minded really stems from history. How you might ask is because people are programmed based off of history to speak in a particular way. This particular way has been set up by thousands of years of discrimination. It's very hard with these barriers for people to look into through other people's eyes, in other people's shoes, right? And people don't want to work with people who are different, It's very difficult to, because it takes more brain power. If it takes more brain power, how do you know that that answer is going to be correct if it's harder to do? Just because it's easier, it's not the right solution. Now, people hate being told what to do on top of that. And being aligned with history, being told what to do, about how to treat a certain class is very difficult because you're taught how your parents act or how people around you act. So it goes back to that sense of community and culture and how two neighboring warring countries still might have feud based on thousands of years of war. Flaws. Now, every single one of us here today have flaws. We probably don't want to recognize it. We probably all think we're perfect in every way, though everyone has advantages and disadvantages. And it's all about your mental ability or your physical ability. You see, people in this country view flaws as disabilities or disadvantages, and they're not. Next is discrimination. And this has really failed on people wanting to change. And without people wanting to change, they want to create basically a superhuman, which is when everyone's alike. And eugenics is one of these examples. So So eugenics really wants to create the superhuman, and people hate to change. And that's basically what discrimination comes from. It also comes from economic incentives and lack of diversity throughout history that the barriers have set up. So what are some benefits of diversity? Well, seeing things through other people's perspectives, which is a really major point. And seeing things through other people's perspectives could actually broaden the reach of an idea to every single person in the US or in the world, right? Because it's going to be easier to figure out something. Dr. Kathy Phillips of Columbia University actually states, and she conducted a study where she found out that people with different backgrounds or who are more diverse actually, figure out a problem much more efficiently, figure out the problem, and it'll be more accurate than people who might figure out the problem in 10 seconds. It might be wrong because they all have the same idea of working through something. If I grew up in the same community as someone else, I've been taught how to solve this problem, how to think in a certain way. Another point is that, the Peterson Institute of Economics states that, conducted a study with Ernst & Young, and they say that women in a leadership position actually make their companies perform at a better rate and with more, with more profits being available to them. And, again, we can reach more people through looking through their shoes, looking through their perspective. So what are some of my proposed solutions? Are educating people on where this hatred comes from, where all this discrimination comes from, and how these barriers have been set up. Because without that, we won't be able to overcome them. And we have to remember that in our biology, in our code that makes us up, we're 99% the same. There's only 1% of us that creates our skin color, our eye color, our hair color. And it's all based on natural variation. It doesn't define who you are, It's just something that makes you look the way you do. And we can't just control that. So I want to leave you with one thing to think about today. How can we include more people into the way we think? How can we look through other people's perspectives to include more people? And always think about the other person. Think how to see their views, because they might be right in the way they think. Thank you.